Okay, I guess I'm live, ready to go. So I started with this picture because I just think it's a neat picture. It's somewhere in Holland, but I thought if we were ever to do work on the bridges, that maybe we could put the river over the roads instead. So that's why I particularly like this picture. So the bridges through the city are spanned at interval, or the river through the city spanned at intervals by beautiful bridges. So that's what we're going to look at today. So I thought I'd start with one of the most beautiful of all. Of course, you'll agree when you see this picture. And I'm going to roughly take you on a trip down the river with a few little detours back and forth. There. And that's my dog, Max. So as you know, this is the Hanlon Bridge, which is the first bridge on the rivers as you're coming down them. The route planning for this bridge began in 1967 because of the rapid expansion of Guelph's suburbs. It took over from the Highway 6, the Brock Road, that went right through the center of the city. And you might always say that's General Brock's Road, but it actually isn't General Brock's Road. Thomas Rees Brock, born in 1811, came and settled in the Aramasa Township, and he's the one that supervised the building of the Brock Road. It was once called the Aboukir Trail. Also, that was based on an Indian trail coming up through from Dundas. Dundas became kind of a center for trade, so the farmers wanted a better road to get down there. So in 1848, Mr. Brock supervised the building of this road. And so the Hanlon replaced that road, which we know as Highway 6 or Brock Road. So this is the bridge to start our journey. But it's also a significant bridge because of what it replaced. This is what was there before. This is the Sleeman Brewery and the Sleeman House. And the bridge, the Hanlon Bridge in the picture that I showed you, which is the Wellington Interchange, is right on top of where that brewery was. Now, in Victorian times, they had to show things like this with black smoke coming out of the chimney. That meant they were industrious and the factory worked. So that's why you'll see every factory picture, if you look in Bonnie Dirtnell's books, every factory has black smoke. It was also traditional to make it way bigger than it was. So although the Sleeman Brewery and the outbuildings look really, really big, they're not. And so that was demolished for the Hanlon Bridge. So I thought that was a good way to start, by a bridge that was demolished, a heritage building to begin. Now, I'd like you to look at the map. And what this map shows us is that in the early years, there were islands. There were two braids to the Speed River, and a braid is a second part to it. So the Sleeman Brewery in the previous picture was where that square is, and the dotted line down the side is the end of the city of Guelph at that time when he built the brewery, and he chose that deliberately so that the city wouldn't be able to control what he did. So as we move along, these are the things we're going to look at next. So the Silver Creek, the Pond Creek, the three bridges at Edinburgh Road, and the Gowes Bridge. So they're all in this section of the Speed that was considerably altered. Now you'll notice in the map there is no Wellington Street. The Wellington Street is on top of the second braid of the river. So this is one of the 3 bridges at Edinburgh Road, and it's gone now. It's demolished and gone. And this is what it looked like when they were filling in the second braid to make Wellington Street. So all the islands in the middle disappeared. And the bridges, the 3 bridges at Edinburgh, are the marked parts. I know the picture's not really great. It was out of the newspaper and it's been copied several times. So the one was buried around 1958 to create Wellington Street. So the tributaries into the Speed, the above ground creeks, the Silver Creek and the Pond Creek, they're the only 2 that are now above ground, daylighted. And so they have their bridges as Waterloo Avenue goes over them. This is the Silver Creek. And if you follow it all up, you can still walk. It's quite a beautiful trail. And you'll come up to this lovely railway bridge. So the bridges on the tributaries are interesting if you want to take a walk up them. This is the Pond Creek from the little walking bridge along the river. So it's looking straight ahead to Waterloo Avenue. And if you've ever been on a walk with Jeremy Shute, he'll take you inside there and play his trumpet, because it has beautiful limestone tunnels inside. So the 2 tributaries also, I'm too close, aren't I? Two tributaries are quite a part of our bridge story. And then this one. I think of it as the eyes of Guelph, because it's so beautiful. And if you stand at the edge of the mill pond at a certain time of day, you can see the eyes looking out over this very historic spot. So the Gal Bridge was built in conjunction with the Gal Mill. And Mr. Gow had quite a large mill and tannery here. It's totally gone now, except, excuse me, for the concrete bridge. But the Gal Bridge did start out as a wooden bridge. Maybe like this in the picture, we don't know, it's a sketch. So this was 1852, and this picture is 1897, that shows you the tannery and the concrete bridge. Brian, you want to hold up the painting that you have? Brian has a painting of the Gowbridge tannery. So who was he, Peter Gow? He was quite an influential person in Guelph history. And this is what his story. So he arrived in Guelph, and he inquired pretty well all the lands along the Speed from the Gal Bridge, where it is now, right over to Gordon Street. And he established the mills, and then he built a tannery and a leather goods store. In 1862, he had quite a complex of buildings there, plus the mill pond. And in 1850, there was a little problem with the farmers in Guelph. They were charging a toll on the Dundas Road. We know that as Gordon Street, and the farmers did not want to pay the toll. So Peter Gow and the city built the Gow Bridge to bypass the tolls. So there you go, Doug Ford. That's what you have to do. Imagine a heritage bridge. So the first one was built for that purpose. Then the stone bridge in 1897. So the picture, if you can see it, shows the date stone that's set into the side of the bridge. And then in 1910, the whole estate, the whole farm, was acquired by the city, and that's where our landfill is, our park, Royal City Park, along the edges of the stone walls. That's all landfill. There's dead cows and dead cats and refrigerators and old stoves underneath that lovely area. The walls were built in 1933 by the Depression area men who were paid to build those walls. I'd like to introduce you to this man. You may not have heard of him. His name is Samuel Strickland, and he built 2 of the first bridges in Guelph. I'm a librarian. We'll talk. So this is his book, 27 Years in Canada West, and he tells the story of his life when he arrived in Canada West and all the places he walked. And he talks about building the bridges for John Galt when he lived in Guelph. So the book, 27 Years in Canada West, he also had a well-known family. His 2 sisters were Catherine Parr Trail and Susanna Moody. So more books, Roughing It in the Bush, and The Backwoods of Canada. And so you can tell that they were quite an exploring family, quite a writing family. But this quotation from the Dictionary of Canadian Biography mentions where he was Galt's engineer for the Canada Company, and that he kept the labor rolls and superintended the building of roads and bridges. So he's an important figure in our history because of what he did by building the first 2 bridges. So in this map of Guelph, which most of you will have seen before, you can see where the 2 bridges were. And this is a description from the Annals of Guelph by Acton Burrows. So can you read it all right, or do you want me to read it to you? Read it? He was employed in building 2 bridges, one over the Speed and the other over the Aramasa branch. You'll see this happen in a few places where the Speed, the Aramasa is often labeled as the Speed, and it was considered as a branch of the Speed. That over the Speed, where Allen's Bridge is now, so remember that for a little later, appears from a painting executed in the fall of 1828. This is the painting you're looking at now. To have been a very substantial and not inelegant structure, built on piles, the superstructure being partly of squared timbers. This was a great convenience to the settlers, as a good number of farms had been cleared on the other side of the river, and the farmers had hitherto been compelled to cross in a rude ferry consisting of a raft of logs lashed together, and the stream, especially in the spring, was very swift. This was frequently attended with considerable labor. Attempted. So that's the picture, and the part with the X on it is the bridge that Acton Burrows is talking about in the Annals of Guelph. So that was the first bridge. Then the Gordon Street Bridge didn't quite look like this when Strickland built it. It was apparently also a wooden bridge. I just like this picture because that was a canoe ballet for the Two Rivers Festival. I thought it was a nice picture. So this is the road that was the Brock Road and the Aboukir Road. And this bridge was built to kind of imitate the arches of the Gal Bridge in 2001. Then the Aramasa Bridge is the second one that Strickland built, the original one. And in 1874, it looked like this drawing of the bridge. In 1900, it was the same bridge. You can see it's like a bowstring bridge with sitting on limestone pillars. And I think I like this beautiful picture. I just think, because it almost looks like today, but look at the tagline underneath it. It's the Aramora Road, not the Aramasa Road. But what you can see there, just beyond where the old car is, you can see the train coming. It's going to come across the road, and the arm is going to come down. So I don't think it looks a lot different now than it did in the time when it was there. In June 1964, the whole thing collapsed. That's what it looked like when it fell into the river. And therefore it was replaced with the present Aramasa Bridge. So starting out as Strickland's wooden bridge, and then the bowstring bridge, and then down it fell. So the next one I'm going to take to you is our beauty spot in Guelph. And this is at the confluence of the Speed and the Aramasa. And this was the gathering place of the First Nations. They all came together here, according to stories, to share food, to play games, to reacquaint themselves with each other. So all of the different nations met at this spot at the confluence of the Speed. So in the year when this was built, these are the timber framers of America, and they came to Guelph for their convention, 400 of them. Now, if I'm really lucky, this video will work. If I'm not lucky, it will not work. Let me just, would like to show you the video. Shoot. Let's see if it'll play. Can you see it? I know it's little, but. It's the right spot. If it's going to show it to me. It worked at home. Yeah. So they built the bridge on the flat area beside it. They poured the concrete pillars, and then they lifted the bridge and put it on top of those pillars. So in June of 1992, they built the whole bridge as a connection between the trails on both sides. And there, in this bridge, a lot of you will know, there is not one nail. It's built of Douglas fir, and they used all the little blocks that they pounded in. If you walk through the bridge, you'll know that. So these are just some shots of them doing the building. So I can switch back now. It was playing, honest, it did. So June 1992, the men put it up all right there in 1 week while they were here for a convention. The planning took a lot longer than that, and now I think it is probably the most photographed bridge in the city. I like that one because of the lighting. This shows you the spans that it was sitting on. And another picture of the canoe ballet underneath the bridge, just because I like it. So let's look as we go along the river to the area known as the Mill Lands. So this is in the bend of the river, just kind of above the confluence, and it's where Arthur Street is, where all of the streets kind of come together in a funny tangle. So this is the Mill Lands, and Peregrine Maitland, in his report for the Canada Company in May 3rd, so just 2 weeks after Guelph was, the tree was cut down, There are 17 valuable mill sites on the banks of the Speed within a stretch of 1.5 miles. That's why it was speed. It was speedy enough to drive the mills. So this is the remnants of Allen's Mill before there were tents there, down in Heritage Park. And there were it's quite a complex of bridges. These two are gone, but these were the footbridges that joined across now the metalworks, the Spring Mill Distillery, to the other side where the milling operations were. So the footbridges were the way the workers went back and forth, and some little carts of stuff. This is 1880. Now I think of this as a big tangle at this area. So it was originally called the Wells Bridge because Arthur Wells and Sir Casimir Gzowski, remember Peter Gzowski? This was his, I believe, great-grandfather or grandfather, were the ones who built the Grand Trunk Railway that went from, where did it start? Goderich? Somewhere out there, all the way through Rockwood. And this was the bridge they built, with great foresight, right? You can see that it has a track and room enough for the second track. So Metrolinx has kind of ruined it a little bit, but at least it's got the second track. And I like this closest picture because it shows you the train going over the top and the bridge underneath. And underneath that is the other part of the Allen's Dam. So it's quite a tangle. The first bridge with the stone pillars was built in 1854. And then in 1910 it was rebuilt. And it's been built again. But those pillars have stayed the same pretty well. And this is a good kind of panoramic picture of the bridge area in 1890. And if you were to follow along this track that curves around, you can just see, if you kind of squint a little bit on the blurry picture, the station that was the Priory, John Galt's former house, the first house in Guelph, and it was turned into the railway station. So that's going around the corner to that. And so it's a nice kind of overview of the Allen's Bridge to see what a construction it was. And this shot, this is thanks to Brian actually, when he was doing research for the Heritage Conservation District at the Reformatory. He found this picture with Mr. Allen's diary that talked about the horses and wagons bringing the stones for this, what's going on in this picture, from the quarry at the Reformatory, which belonged to Mr. Allen at that time. So in 1869, and you can see the notation on the side that this was David Allen's mill. This is the foundation of a new laid dam on the 24th of August, 1869. The old dam gave way on the 19th of April, 1869, and the Grand Trunk Railway. So it tells a whole story of where the stone came from, how they repaired it, and what it looked like in 1869. And that's where it came from the OR. And just because I think this is a beautiful photograph, I saw it on Facebook, and it's by a Mike Pigeon. I don't know if anyone knows him. It's beautiful, beautiful photographs. But this one I thought was really gorgeous of the dam. So it's a free, you can say, oh, isn't that lovely? So our next bridge on the way up is the Heffernan Street Bridge. And there were 3 versions of the bridge over the years. This is the second version. It's a neat picture of people walking across the Heffernan Bridge. And the photo on the right is another of Mike Pigeon's. That's very atmospheric, I think. Beautiful. So with respect to Arthur Palmer, I couldn't find a picture of the first bridge, the wooden bridge, so I made this up. So this is St. George's Church. And when Archbishop Palmer came to Guelph, before he was an archbishop, he arrived in 1832. And he lived in a little house across the river. So it's the white one in the middle of that little picture. And he used to row across the river. See, I told you I made it up. I hope it's not disrespectful. So he asked the city to build a wooden bridge. So there it is. Sorry. Sorry, I don't mean to offend anybody, but I couldn't think of what else to do. And then this is a later postcard. This is the second bridge, but you can see his house. It's the one with the little peak, and that house is still there as you walk down the Heffernan Bridge. And the owner of it has claimed several times to Heritage Guelph and to anybody who will listen that it's the oldest house in Guelph. But actually isn't. But that was where, right, Brian? Right, I think, yes, not. But it's a nice picture of the second Heffernan Bridge. So this is what it looked like. It was like our present one, a scenic bridge. People liked to walk across it. But there was one problem. And you would think that an engineer might think of this. It ended just as the tracks, just at the tracks of the Junction Railway. So when the second person was killed, the city decided they'd better replace the bridge because it just stopped right where the tracks are. So you can imagine if you walk down the river path, what that looked like. So they, in 1914, completed the third Heffernan Bridge. So it's not quite the same one we have now, but the one we have now is modeled on it. But I thought it was an interesting picture of the construction of the bridge. You can see all the girders and the designation plaque from the city, the graceful arched bridge. Now, I'd like to talk to you about this one. And you'll hear a little bit, well, I have to sort of refer to my notes on this one because it's quite a complicated story. So what you're looking at on the other side of the bridge was originally the Wellington Foundry. And it produced metalworks, but at one time it was also owned by the English brothers. So you know the English appliances. So they started here. And then the English brothers moved to Toronto and continued manufacturing their appliances. So there was an earlier bridge in 1860 on the river, and it was called the English Hunter Bridge because it went to the English Foundry. The first foundry there was built by Adam Robertson in 1849, then by Robert Crowe of Crowe Ironworks, then in 1851 by Inglis and Evatt, and they made engines and boilers there. So this is now the Millside townhouses, and the bridge served to move goods back and forth between the city, the roads, and into the foundry. So that's why it was a driving bridge at that time. So in 1882, the bridge was built by the Hamilton Bridge Company at a cost of $1,000. And it was commissioned by City Council. And it served as a link for a whole number of years. And it became well used because it was a strong bridge that people could walk on. So in 2020, I was going to lead a walking tour across the bridge. Nope. Always check ahead of time. The bridge was gone. It was under repair, and that's the bridge sitting on outside the works yard. So it was repaired. It was a considerable study that was done on what to do, how to keep the bridge, because it was designated by the city. And so what they've done with it is kind of odd if you go across it now, because it hides the original truss bridge that was there, and it's kind of hidden. You can see in the top picture how it's kind of put inside the other bridge, and it doesn't really show it off that well. Now, we're going to, when I've finished speaking, I'm going to ask someone in the audience to come and talk about what life was like at the Norwich Bridge. I do history, he lived it, so I'll ask him to come up in just a few minutes. So these are some pictures that show it in that time period, 1954. Now I'd like to take you down the Aramosa branch of the river. How am I doing? Okay. Down the Aramosa branch of the river, down to the area of the reformatory grounds. So when we go down there, we'll see a couple of other outstanding bridges in the city of Guelph. So this will be the McQuillan's Bridge that was built in 1916. This is an early picture of it. You may remember driving through that bridge. This type of bridge was invented and built by Charles Mataney, not sure which, who lived in Elora. And over the years, he created this style of bridge, the bowstring arch bridge design. If any of you come from or go through Eden Mills, you'll know there was one of these in Eden Mills, and there was a huge, huge battle to keep it, but they lost that battle and it's gone. So this is one of the few left, and it's in terrible shape, terrible shape. It is owned by the city, just saying. They could kind of fix it up, you know. So Mataney built over 50 of these bridges through southwestern Ontario. Unfortunately, they've turned out unable to carry the weight of heavy traffic all the time. So a lot of them are gone now or moved, as this one was, moved from Stone Road over to the side so that it could become part of the hiking trail. And who were the McQuillans? They were early settlers. They arrived in Guelph in 1827. And James McQuillan was a stonemason, and it's argued that he built the first stone building in Guelph. It's the Stone Schoolhouse, which is right behind or opposite the GO train station in that parking lot. That's where it was. So the first stone schoolhouse. There's an article about it in Historic Guelph if you want to find out about it. So this bridge replaced again an earlier wooden bridge, and the land, the McQuillan land, became part of the Ontario Agricultural College. It was designated by the city in 2002 because it's the only bowstring arch bridge in Guelph. It's also marked as provincially significant, and it was moved in 2002 to become part of the hiking trail. So that's just off Stone Road, near the Barber Scout Camp. The next one is a beautiful bridge. If you walk down the trails through the York lands or the Ontario Reformatory lands, you'll see this bridge. And if you're intrepid, you'll cross it, because you do have to balance a little part on a 2x4. Some people call it the Grassy Bridge, but it's the most beautiful view of the Aramosa River. When I was there one day, an eagle flew right over. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful view. So we need to thank two people for this, Brian Scarrett and John Fisher of the Hiking Club, for bringing this bridge to our attention. So it's the Heritage Trestle Bridge, and it will be part of our urban park, will it not? So thanks to John and the Hiking Club, they arranged for a study of this bridge. It's actually made of Douglas fir, because as you can see, I've taken little pieces out of news reports. That's what these are. So apparently the CPR used to carry Douglas fir on their trains, and when they went across Canada and they needed to build a bridge to cross a river, they just take a bit off and build a bridge. So that's what this one came from. It was constructed for the reformatory as a spur line that went from the quarry and the lime kilns up to the reformatory buildings so that the prisoners could build them. And also to take the stone away. A lot of the 401 and the QEW are built on limestone from our quarry. And it is a beautiful place. We hope, I'd love to see concerts there, but anyway, that's a different topic. It's an interesting comparison here. So in 2021, the Hiking Club commissioned a study, and they said it would cost about $350,000 to repair and repurpose the bridge as part of the hiking trail. In 2022, Infrastructure Ontario did a study and said it would cost $350,000 to knock it down. Can we think about that for just a minute? So John can correct me if I've made any mistakes in that. So when you hear about the Heritage Trestle Bridge, that's what it's talking about. And the Guelph Hiking and Trail Club brought the city 2 new bridges. So there's the Gosling Bridge on the James Street Trail. This is the former track of the Toronto Suburban Railway. And it bridges, there's a kind of waterfall, and you had to step on stepping stones, which meant that the trail wasn't accessible. So now with the Gosling Bridge, it makes the whole James Street Trail accessible. And the other one just recently opened is the Crane Park Community Bridge. So this is down just south of Stone Road, and bridges allows you to continue the trail to go right across it. So both of those new bridges, thanks to the Hiking and Trail Club. And I'd just like to conclude by talking about a couple of disappeared bridges. They went away. Did you get that from So the first one is one that I heard about a long time ago. Somebody came into the library and said, I need to find out about the Monkey Bridge. And I'd never ever heard of it. And so I found this picture with the help of Jeremy Shute, who's done a lot of studying on the underground streams of Guelph. But I think it's a beautiful picture of a bridge with the people walking on it and the little carriage that they've been riding on. And it was either on the spot of the present Victoria Bridge or close to the Victoria Bridge, because there was a Victoria Park along there that the rowing club, Speed River Rowing Club, used to go up to. So they called it the Monkey Bridge, because a monkey bridge is the highest bridge in a ship that goes over the control area. And I don't know why, if that's why it was called that. Someone else told me it was because the kids used to swing on it like monkey bars. So I'm not sure which is right. But you'll see it's also was standing on limestone pillars that were constructed. So it's entirely gone. And this one, I could spend an hour talking about the Niska Bridge. This was a very, very sad, and I might say stupid, decision by the city to take this down. You may remember it as a one-lane bridge on the Niska Road, You might have been annoyed at having to stop and watch the traffic. They could have just got another Bailey Bridge and fixed it for $300,000 on Kijiji. We found one. Instead, you spent $6 million replacing this lovely Bailey Bridge that took out all the limestone bases. I'm sorry.
Into a trucker
Yeah.
paradise.
I'm sorry. Am I being too political? But this was one of those delegations at City Council. But it was sad to see it go. So that's a disappeared bridge. So, what about bridges for the future? This is a bridge that was built by the prisoners to celebrate Guelph's centennial in 1927. This was a bridge that crossed over Wyndham Street to celebrate Guelph's centennial in 1927. So, will we have bridges for the future in 3 years' time on April 23rd, 2027? 3 years left to go. Guelph will be 200 years old. So maybe a memorial bridge might be in order. Thank you very much. This is my story of bridges to the past. And I'd like to turn the microphone over to Don Surson, who will talk to you about some adventures when he was growing up near the Norwich Street Bridge. This is a picture of, an actual picture of the Norwich Street Bridge gang jumping into the river. And this is the book, and Don has some for sale at the end of the evening. Don?
Thanks, Susan. Appreciate that. And ladies and gentlemen, members of the Historical Society of Guelph, I was invited here, and I tell you, I just took it as a privilege to be invited to talk to people about the Norwich Street Bridge. I thought there was only 23 people here, my wife said. You've made me as nervous now as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs.
If you've got 2 hours, he'll tell you all kinds of stories.
You might wonder why I'm nervous. Well, I'm a storyteller. And storytellers or story writers write in first or third person narrative, and historians write in analytic style writing. So the only difference is that you might measure something off as a half a centimeter, and I'll get it as 20 meters or so. The first thing I want to talk to you about is and I'm not going to talk about the bridge itself, maybe I'll just touch on it, but my book covers a bit about the bridge, and we were pretty active there. In fact, Susan wasn't absolutely correct because of the... Can you put that picture up of the bridge, of the one that came out of my collection?
The which one?
The Norwich Street Bridge?
Oh, yeah. Okay, just go back. There.
That one on the right side there is... I had a lot of trouble finding a picture of the Norwich Street Bridge, and I found this in my own collection at home. It's from 1954. I do believe that the monument there is a survey monument, which is the way they did things in the old days. So that would be the edge of the city property. And then, of course, the river property is beyond that. But Susan mentioned a monkey bridge. If you'd have seen us back in the 1950s, we could go over the side of that bridge, swing down underneath and across the crisscrosses and sit on a pipe. And I don't think that picture shows the pipe, but there was a 10 or 12-inch pipe under the Norwich Street Bridge. And we could sit on that bridge, and we did all kinds of things under there. I won't go into that, but my memory fails me. But rather than talk about the bridge so much, I thought I would talk about a couple of things that you could see from the bridge. And one is the Goldie Mill. Now, I don't know how many people here remember 1953, but I remember, I remember were you in Guelph then?
I was in Guelph in 1932.
Oh, we don't have to go back that far. You look good for 37.
I'm just going on to the other pictures, Don.
Oh, okay. I'm just going to keep talking.
Yep.
So the Goldie Mill was, if you were standing on the bridge looking south or east, depending on the perspective, towards Woolwich Street, looking toward Woolwich Street, it was up on the right. And a lot of activity went on there. It was a very famous mill at one time when the Goldie family owned it, as a matter of fact. But in 1953, and I do not know the day, and I had some of the best people I could meet try and find the date, and it's a well-kept secret, but there was a fire at the Goldie Mill. Yeah. And I can only tell you that my recollection would be late summer or early fall. And the reason being is my mother woke us up so we could look at this fire. And I remember we lived up on 179 Woolwich Street. Al Damon owned the property, but we lived there. And out my bedroom window, I looked down Cardigan Street, and I could see this fire and the plume of black smoke coming up. What's the neighbors told us, it was the molasses burning, but we kind of figured out after it was probably some sort of a tar. And it was a spectacular, dangerous fire, and that was in 1953. But I want to tell you a couple of things about that fire. If you've seen these new things, and they put them up, and they put a candle in them, and they float up, and they go out until the candle goes out, and then they come back or get hit by an airplane or whatever. Well, these were coming off the Goldie Mill, and they were going across the river, across the Joe Wolfond Park, over to Perth Street. Not Arthur Street, but Perth Street it was called. And on the hospital side of Perth Street, there was a threat of them landing on the rooftops. So we found out from the neighbors, the chief put a pumper down there, and he was protecting anywhere they gone. So there'd be 3 or 4 firemen with that pumper. They'd race over with a hose of water and put it out, and protected the rooftops, which was pretty good. And they were protecting between Spring Street and Pearl Street. At that time, Spring Street went from Perth all the way up to Delhi. There was no block in the middle of it. Anybody remember that? You weren't with us though when we got our driver's license and tried going up that in the Austin Healey with 14 people in the Austin Healey. It wasn't even an Austin Healey, it was a baby Austin.
And I put the canoe up because you're talking about the Goldie Mill.
Well, we used to steal I wanted to mention that we built those canoes, took us 2 or 3 days, but we stole the steel from the burnt out Goldie Mill, and then we folded them all over, and then we stole the tar. Is James Gordon here? We stole the tar from Armco down on George Street. Then we could melt it and put it in the end so they would float. But that's what they looked like. They were just corrugated steel. And we were just kids, mind you. We weren't very old, 12 years old maybe, 10 or 12. Now you made me lose my train of thought. The other thing, can you imagine what would have happened though if you're over on Perth Street, if the wind had turned 180 degrees and took those fire pieces across to London Road and Dufferin Street and Cardigan Street? And do you remember the Cleffer Coal Company was on London Road, and that's where all those new houses, I was showing my wife, all those new houses were on the property that was developed from the Cleffer Coal Company. However, the Stewart Lumber property was right there, and half of it was a tinderbox. Can you imagine how devastating it could have been? The chief was certainly on the ball there. And something else we found out a couple of days later from the local people, there was 7, or just leave that one, Sue, I'm going to come to it. There was 7 or 8 alarms went in on that fire. That's how dangerous that fire was and how concerned the chief was. He couldn't bring the whole fire department in because someone has to stay in case there's another fire going on. But he rang alarms into Acton, Fergus, Wellington County, Breslau, and perhaps Kitchener. They needed that much help to get down there to get that Goldie fire out. So that was the beginning of the end and in the book I refer to the Goldie Dam and the Goldie log perhaps and the Goldie chimney. That chimney is very interesting, it's still there. And also the Goldie plant itself where we could steal the steel to build boats. The chimney, we could walk right into it. And there's a reason for that. The chimneys are they're all boarded up now, or it's welded up. But they used to light a fire in them to get the chimneys working so the engineer could switch over to the boilers. And he had a draw on his chimney then to get them going. But can we get the log up? I want to show you this log. No, that's not a log.
Yeah, it's back of it.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I mentioned the chimney, and
there it is.
yeah, see this log? We actually cut that tree down. And we went at it with knives. It's discussed in the book, and then it came down. It fell down to the water, across the water, and we used it all that year. I often wonder what happened to it the next year or two. I didn't ever figure out what that was about. But it was a handy piece of equipment to have, and that chimney was there, and we had our slingshot fights. I mean, we used to hang around there, and that was good, and there's the bridge again. Now, can we have the crossing back up, Susan?
Okay, I'm gonna go through. You'll be tired of seeing these pictures.
I'm going to show you a railway crossing here, and this is the Norwich Street Railway crossing.
You keep talking.
Okay, I'll try to keep talking. This crossing, as we remembered at that time, had 5 tracks on it. And they're in the book and they're lettered. So once again, come to the end of the bridge, face south or look toward Woolwich Street. And the first track you came to was what we were known as the coal track. And if you've been in the tour of the Goldie Mill, now there's a walkway that goes from Norwich Street down to the chimney at the back. There's a walkway goes down there. Well, this first track, the 8th track there, went up and it was raised up a bit, and the transport trucks come in behind, and there were chutes built into the side of this wall they had built, and they opened the chutes and they flowed down into the trucks. I'm supposing that horse and buggy did it before the trucks were around, but that's what was known as the coal track. And then the second track you're looking at, we're still looking toward Woolwich Street, was the Goldie Mill track. And the trainmen would put an empty up there and they would load it, or they'd take a load up in a certain door and put it and they'd empty it, and that's what it was used for. The third track, Susan, you'll be interested in this, was not the Grand Trunk Railroad, but it was the Canadian Pacific's main line to Godrich. It ends now at the end of, behind the General Electric. But at that time it went right up, crossed, it came out of Guelph Junction, which is Campbellville, crossed Highway 6 at the Loblaws Plaza. Anybody remember that term, Loblaws Plaza? And then it turned into Roots Plaza. And then it went on through Elmira, Millbank, Milverton, Blythe, and into Godrich. And then it came back out. And the next track, I'm only showing 4 here. The next track, if you're on the right side, facing looking Moe Street, you're on the right side, the main line, you open the switch, you went down there, and there was a coal company down on Cardigan Street, and it ran all the way down. There were 3 or 4 sheds of coal, and then the cars went down there, and they came right up to the pavement of the CPR station. The CPR station was on this, just on this side of the Airmoss Road, and there's a picture of it in the book, a couple of them. And the next track is the most interesting story of all. It's what we called a transfer track. And what would happen there is the Canadian National would bring down CPR cars and put them there and take their CNR cars. And of course the CPR would put CNR cars there and take away their CPR cars. Is there any railroad men in the... Good, I can say just about anything I want then. I want to qualify that for you, and I hope I don't take up. I'm running short because I'm long-winded. If you were to go up London Road to the end of the buildings on the right, and you'll be almost at Edinburgh Road, and on the right you'll see, and I think the sign may be gone now, but it looks like a walkway. Well, that was that transfer track, and it went across. It came out of the Federal Wires parking lot. Come off of one switch there and then went across. It went down in behind the exhibition park, went past the ball diamond, and then it followed on down the Verney Street. The new water tower was built there around 66, maybe 70, somewhere in there. And crossed Woolwich Street, went down past the Reed and Lang headquarters. The Reed, by the way, was the matriarch of the Reed family today that functions in Guelph. Most of them anyhow related to him. Made a turn to the Halliburton Ice Company, which later became Earl Brimblecomb's Lightning Delivery. Went past Armco and followed on down till it ended up at Norwich Street. If you want to see that, you can still see it. My wife and I drove it tonight, and it's marked down by the water tower. It's marked the spur line, they call it, but it's a CNR spur line, and that's where it came from. I had the pleasure of doing that same trip one time, and I'll tell you a little bit in a minute about that. So there may have been another track in there before that which serviced the lumber mill, but traffic was getting heavier and heavier, so it was no longer necessary to have that. Now, you're standing at the end of the bridge, and if you look to the left, there was another track came off, and it was about 80 feet long. Didn't come to the bridge, the street, to Norwich Street, but that's where a little trolley, and there's a picture of it in the book, they used to park there, and its name was Sparky. And does anybody here remember Sparky? No, it wasn't a fire dog. When the railroads were transitioning from steam to diesel power, some of the manufacturers still used gasoline engines. And these gasoline engines, Sparky had one, and they were a V12, a two-stroke, if there's any mechanics here, and there's 2 spark plugs in each cylinder, hence the name Sparky. That's where the name came from, because it was a gasoline-powered. Diesels don't have spark plugs. There's a lot of mention of Sparky in the book because we hung out there, we got to know the railroad. In fact, John in the book that's mentioned and myself were invited by Bill Glacier one night to go to the junction and back on his steam engine. And I think today, how many people, we'll do it in this room here, how many of you people were kids and you had a 40-mile ride on a steam engine? So that's 1 minute. Okay, I'll just take the minute for the last one with the pictures up. You see the Robert Stewart lumber there? Around about 1984, and it was a Friday morning, about 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were coming up, and all we had was a caboose and 2 diesel engines. We were heading for Godrich, but we had to go up and get cars out of their loads. And there was a fellow standing, and his shack isn't there, but he had a shack after he started developing this. And the Stewart property was quite large because there's a laneway between Norwich and London Road, and if you've never been on it, it's a city laneway. Drive it. Go to Norwich, turn down that laneway, and come out London Road. So in a picture of the fence in there, in fact. So interesting, though, that was where our lives were in the 50s. But anyhow, I said to the engineer, I want to stop here for 5 minutes. Do you see that fellow standing there? Yeah, he said, I see him. And I walked across, and he's standing there, and Bob was 20 years older than me. But I walked across, and I says, how are you doing? He says, where are you going, kid? And I says, we're going up to Godrich. I want to know if you want to come along with us. No railroad officials here, eh? Yeah, I invited him. He says, no, I'll be ready to have the lay down in about 2 hours or 2.5 hours. But one of the things I remember, I started out at Al Kane's City Service. Now, you may know where the Hayek eyeglass place is on the corner of Woolwich and Norwich. That was Al Kane's City Service, hence became a BP. And it might have even went to a Petrocan. But in the middle of the night, Bob would bring up his fleet 2 or 3 times a week to fill them up with gas. When I say fleet, I mean bunk carriers, forklifts, trucks, and then he'd come up himself. What time you work until? Well, we would know. Some nights we'd stay open until midnight. If the Odeon had a good show on, we'd stay till 12:30 or 1 because people might want gas. But we'd tell him, and he'd say, that's fine. And he would show up in a 55 or 56 Imperial, Chrysler Imperial. This is 1957, by the way. Or a 1955 or 56 Packard.
Yeah.
Any old timers remember the Packard? They were brand new then. They were limousines. And there was always 2 of us at the station, but there's usually 2 hanging around there because we wanted to go for something to eat. And we'd jump in with Bob and go and talk to him. But this night that can I take another 30 seconds? This night that I met him there, I says, so what are you doing? Just getting some air? And he says, I don't get tired for a while. Do you want to see my wings? And Bob never talked about the war, but Al Kane did. Al Kane was a bombardier in Lancasters. And he used to tell us stories when he was in the Battle of Britain, and when they were going across, different things would take place or happen. And he tells them they were hilarious stories. Should have cost them their lives, but they didn't. That's what made them hilarious. But Bob never talked about it. But he says, come on in, kid, I want to show you. And I went into this 12 by 12 or 12 by 15 or 15 by 15 shack, and the treasures of this man's life up until 1984 were all around me. He had a cot that he could lay down on. He had a beautiful office desk, probably came out of the building then after it closed. But he says, there's my wings. In North America, they're gold-plated or brass wings they wear. You see them. So next time you're in the airport, if a lady walks by with those wings on, you may be in trouble. No, I'm just being a smart mouth. That's a pilot. That's where they wore them. He says, that was my wings. And he said, the picture on the right, and there was a picture of his squadron and the commander presenting the wings to him. And he said, that's the picture of my plane. On the left was a twin-engine Mitchell. And he was in reconnaissance flying. You know, I just wanted to mention to you that we took it as such a privilege because we make a bit of a derogatory remark in there. And it's just a smart-mouth remark, old man Stewart. But we didn't view Bob as old man Stewart when we got older. In fact, he became a pleasure of a man to know and talk about. He died in 2000 at 84 years old, but he was a historian. You can read many of his books. In fact, Sue gave me one of his books here tonight. Anyhow, there's some stories for you from the Norwich Street, and there's some others that we'll have to try at another time.